Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hey guys, and welcome to the 100th episode of True Drew Podcast. It's kind of hard to believe that the podcast has been going on for almost 2 years. The 2-year anniversary is going to be on October 17th, so not that far away, but I just thought it would be cool for this 100th episode to just do kind of a Q&A. So you may have noticed over the last month or so, I have been dropping a question box in my stories on Instagram, and you guys have sent in a lot of questions, and so I thought it would just be fun to answer them and just kind of do a freestyle episode. You all asked so many great questions, so thank you so much for sending these in. I can't wait to answer them and just talk about my Nancy Drew likes, dislikes, tropes, all of it. Okay, so I guess without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into this. So this first question that I received, someone asked, what Nancy Drew book do you wish you could read for the first time again? So probably for me, it would be either Lilac Inn, the revised text, or Secret of Shadow Ranch, the revised text. I don't know, I feel like both of those books rank really high for me, and they're both so good. I feel like the mysteries are great, there's a lot of good characters, and especially like Secret of Shadow Ranch, that book has a little bit of everything. It's got mystery, romance, intrigue, we have treasure that we're looking for and we find, there's a ranch setting. Like, I love whenever Nancy gets to go on a ranch, like out in the West. I think that's so fun. But then you also have Mystery at Lilac Inn, and I mean, that book has so much going on. We have John McBride helping Nancy. We have Helen in that book. We also have exploding cabins, shark-shaped submarines, like what's not to love? And then there's also the whole added element of Gay Moreau, and she's impersonating all these people. She's impersonating Nancy. I thought that was very fun, but I remember reading that book for the first time, and I was not expecting any of the twists and turns in it, so I would love to read it again for the first time. Maybe just slightly more than Shadow Ranch. Okay, so this next question that you guys asked, someone asked, which was your favorite episode so far of the podcast? I love the podcast. Aw, thank you so much. It makes me so happy when people love to listen to the episodes, so thank you. My favorite episode, I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun with Captive Witness. Like, I was having a lot of fun experimenting with sound effects in that episode for some reason, and I had so much fun making a game out of it, like having multiple choice options, like what do you think Nancy's gonna do next? A, this, or B, that, and so I need to incorporate that in another future episode. It was so fun. And also the Flying Saucer Mystery, that book is so crazy and out there, so I had a lot of fun recording that episode. I thought it was just funny, and I couldn't stop laughing. I mean, that whole book was a trip. You have a horse named Goalpost, Bess is throwing nuts at this guy in the woods, and it's just so bizarre. There's a wild mountain lion that this guy has somehow tamed. It's just every moment of that book was unhinged, so I knew the episode was going to be crazy. Ooh, okay, so this next question is another good one. This person asked, when you picture Nancy Drew, which version do you picture or favor? Modern day versus 1930s, etc. You know, I feel like if you ask anyone that question, their answer is going to be different. Some people favor Nancy in the 30s, some people favor her in the 40s, 50s, early 2000s. For me, I often tend to picture Nancy from the 1960s and 70s covers because that's what I grew up with. She had that flipped out strawberry blonde hair. I think of Nancy from the cover of Mystery of the Moss-Covered Mansion, Clue in the Crumbling Wall, and I think that's what makes Nancy Drew so cool, is because she can be so many different things to so many different people because she's really timeless. She never ages, she's always 18, and then there's just the longevity of the series. I mean, it's been around for so long. This year is the 95th anniversary of Nancy Drew, so I just think that's so neat. But yeah, if I were to narrow Nancy down to a specific era, I tend to think of her in the 1960s and 70s because that's just what I grew up with, and that's when my mom read the series initially, and then she passed them on to me later in the 90s when I was growing up. And I don't know, I don't think it's a coincidence that I tend to love 1960s and 1970s fashion either. I definitely see bits of Nancy Drew in these outfits that I sometimes find when I'm out thrifting. Okay, this next question is going to be a hard one, but someone asked what my favorite Nancy Drew book covers are. Gosh, I have to think about this for a second. Okay, so I'm going to say that my fifth favorite cover is the Hidden Staircase cover, the newer revised cover, where Nancy's wearing like the blue monochromatic skirt and top, and she's flashing the flashlight up the stairs. That is such an iconic cover. I feel like usually when you think of Nancy Drew, or at least when I do, I think of that cover or The Secret of the Old Clock. If I had to pick a fourth favorite cover, it would probably be Mystery of the Moss-Covered Mansion, the one from, I think it's the 60s. I think Rudy Nappy did this edition, but it shows Nancy, Bess, and George, and I think Nancy's wearing like a yellow dress. I have this cover edition on my own bookcase, and the colors they're kind of bright, but at the same time they're muted. I don't know if that makes sense, but they're digging something up or they're burying something. I don't know because I haven't read the original text yet, so I'm really curious and I want to know what that is, but I love that cover. If I had to pick a third favorite cover, it would probably be the Crumbling Wall cover. I like the older version and the newer version, honestly, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes I like one more than the other, but I love how in the older version we have Nancy, Bess, and George at that really tense moment where they're pulling the box out of the wall just as these guys are on the other side trying to dig into the wall and find it. That's really neat, and I love what Nancy's wearing. She's wearing this really pretty green dress. And in the newer version, I usually don't like the Rudy Nappy versions where Nancy's head is floating around, but on that cover it works. I love Nancy's flipped out hair. She's kind of in the foreground and you have the wall behind her and this castle-like estate. It just looks really mysterious. So my second favorite Nancy Drew book cover would probably have to be Mystery of the Fire Dragon. I love that book cover, and I think that it's pretty popular amongst collectors and fans because it's just so bright and vibrant. We have Nancy in this yellow dress, and you see this big archway behind her and fireworks and dragons and stuff going on in the background, and it's just so pretty to look at. Also, I'm gonna tip you guys off to something. I found an Etsy shop where the person has made a purse out of that book cover. So they didn't use the actual book cover, but what they did is they made this purse. It's almost like a box shaped purse, and they did it in sequins. They recreated that cover scene on the face of this purse, and I love to just get on there and look at it sometimes, and I'm like, maybe one day, like maybe for my birthday or something. I'm like, that is just so cool. Now, you probably knew what the number one spot was going to be. I've talked about this on the podcast a few times, but my favorite book cover of all time is The Secret in the Old Attic cover, the one by Rudy Nappy, where Nancy's wearing this red dress. That cover just screams Nancy Drew. She's in the attic. She's got a candle. She's leaned over a trunk. She's looking over her shoulder like she's terrified of something. And then we have this skeleton in the background. It's just such a cool cover and just so pretty. I actually posted about this on Instagram, but I had a really talented artist named Trevor Hawkins. He recreated that cover for me, and I have that, and I need to hang it on my wall. I've got it propped up on my bookcase right now. I'm short, and it's hard for me to hang things on the wall, but it's so cool, and I just think it's so neat that he made that for me. If you're listening, hi Trevor. Thank you again so much for that art piece. I'll always treasure it. Okay, so this next question, we've kind of already talked about the Nancy Drew book covers that I like. This leads into my favorite Nancy Drew books, and the person said that I could do a top 5, which I appreciate because it's really, really hard to narrow down to one, and also I haven't read them all yet, so it's kind of hard to say, but based on what I've read so far, this may not surprise anybody because I talk about my favorites a lot, but I would say that my fifth favorite is Clue of the Velvet Mask. I really liked that book because Nancy took down an entire crime ring, and that was really cool. My fourth favorite would be Secret of the Wooden Lady. That book was really suspenseful, the way that Bess was on the phone with Nancy in the beginning, and then the line cuts out and Nancy has to go save her. We get to go on a boat, and there's really not too many boat mishaps, really, which is kind of surprising. The third favorite book I would have to say is Password to Larkspur Lane, the revised edition. It's really, really good. The pigeons, maybe not the elder abuse, but the pigeons, and we get to take down these bad guys who are exploiting older people, so that's always good in my book. The second favorite, that would probably be Secret of Shadow Ranch, the revised text. Like I said, it's such a good book. And then my favorite is always going to be probably Mystery at Lilac Inn, unless I read one at some point later in the podcast that I like even more than that one. I just love the revised text for that book. It's so fun and so out there, but it still makes sense. Like, it's not crazy like Flying Saucer Mystery or Captive Witness or some of those other books. Now, those are just my favorite top 5 books from the original 56 series. I thought it would be cool to do another top 5 like of the later books because I have read some of the later books. So some of these books, I don't think we've covered any of these on the podcast yet, but if I had to narrow it down to a top 5 for the later paperbacks, I would probably say number 5 for me would be Mystery 143, Mystery on Maui. Nancy gets to go to Hawaii. She's there for a surf competition. It's kind of what the game Creature of Kapu Cave is loosely based on, but loosely. Like, there's not much alike at all, but it's a really good book, and it's great if you want to feel like you're at the beach. Number 4 would probably be The Email Mystery, Mystery number 144. I've mentioned this on the podcast a couple times. I don't know if it's just because it's set in the 90s when cyber cafes were all the rage and we're just figuring out email and internet lingo, but it's so fun to see Nancy and Bess, especially in this book. It's just a fun little book and kind of funny in a lot of ways. It's kind of dated, but I still love it. My third favorite book in the later paperbacks, and okay, we have covered this one on the podcast, but The Broken Anchor. This is number 70. I really liked this book because, again, the beach vibes are immaculate, and also there's a lot of suspense in this book. I feel like they did that really, really well, and I like the book better than the game that's based on it, Ransom of the Seven Ships, but it's such a good book. If I had to pick my second favorite of the later paperback editions, it would probably be Treasure in the Royal Tower, which is mystery number 128 for obvious reasons. I mean, the game that is based off of it is perfect in every way. I will accept no arguments, but also the book is great, and the book and the game are very, very similar. So if you like the game and you haven't read the book, chances are you will love the book. The characters' names are the same, there's some key plot points that are the same, and Nancy gets to be at this little ski chalet, and it's snowy, and it's a good book to curl up with some hot chocolate. Now, if I had to pick a top favorite, number 1 of the later paperback editions, and this is just of the books that I've read so far, I would say Message in a Haunted Mansion, which is number 122. Again, there's a game based off of it. That game's fantastic. The book's great. And this is another example of the book and the game being very, very similar. There's one other, Secret of the Scarlet Hand. It's pretty similar, but this one's just so fun. You're in San Francisco. You get to see Nancy investigating this bed and breakfast that's having all these issues, and it's just written really, really well. I don't know. I need to look up all the ghostwriters for these books that I like. I'd be curious to know how many are written by the same people or different people, and I think you kind of gravitate towards certain books and the writing style, and this one is just amazing. Okay, and I did have a couple honorable mentions. I think that The Haunted Bridge is a good one from the original series too. I liked that book. And from the later paperbacks, an honorable mention for The Curse of the Black Cat, which is number 158, and A Taste of Danger 174. The Curse of the Black Cat is what the computer game Warnings at Waverly Academy is based on, another fantastic game, and A Taste of Danger shows Nancy, Bess, and George going to this culinary retreat where they get to learn to cook, and there's sabotage, and I really like that book, and it's kind of funny because that's one of the only later paperbacks that I got when I was still a teenager. I didn't know that there were later Nancy Drew books till I got that one, and it was a Christmas present that I got when I was probably a freshman in high school, but it has a little special place in my heart. Okay, so one of the next questions that you all sent in, someone asked, what is your favorite Nancy Drew trope? And I said probably the boating accidents because it's kind of hilarious how many times Nancy falls out of boats or has a boat wreck into her boat. It's just this whole thing. And then also how quickly Nancy picks up these random skills. She's just like, yeah, I can fill in for this person at the opera, or I can do ballet, like when she's never had any formal training. Those are probably the top 2 tropes that I think of when I think of the Nancy Drew series. There's a couple others. Probably the ones that I dislike the most are when everyone has an inheritance. Like, Nancy meets these people who are like just about to turn 18 and they're like, yeah, I have an inheritance and my cousin has an inheritance, and it's so unbelievable. And I still just really wish that Nancy would get paid for her work because she works really, really hard for these people. I also think that one other funny trope in the Nancy Drew universe is the coincidences. Like, Nancy will just happen to know somebody that Carson knows. Like, the fact that Carson knew that guy who was getting off the flying saucer in the flying saucer mystery, and he's like, oh, hey, Ted, or whatever his name was. I was just like, really? How do you know everyone? You guys know this person and that person, and just the coincidences alone in these books will just blow your mind. But that's also kind of why we love them, right? Okay, so this next question is, would you ever do an episode on Nancy Drew knockoffs? Okay, so I think what's being referred to here is the Dana Girls mysteries, Judy Bolton. I think there's Peggy Lane or something. There's so many different series out there, and that's what makes the Nancy Drew series even more amazing in my eyes, is that there were so many imitators and so many other series that branched off of this one. But I'll never say never. I actually do have a couple of the Dana Girls books. I think I have one of the Judy Bolton books, and I really wanted to read them just to compare and see how I liked them compared to Nancy Drew, so you never know. So this next question is, what have you learned about the books that you didn't know before when you started? So I'm not gonna lie, up until pretty recently, maybe a few months before I started the podcast, I didn't realize that there were original texts of these books. That kind of blew my mind when I went down that rabbit hole. I think I found a book with a different cover on it, and I was like, oh wait, I have this book at home, but the cover's different, so what's going on? And then I looked in the index and I was like, this has 25 chapters and normally they have 20. And the first book that I ever bought that was an original text was The Clue of the Broken Locket. I found it at a yard sale for like $1 or $2, and I was just amazed at first how old it was, but then just reading it, I was like, this is completely different from the book that I read as a kid, and so that was kind of cool. And so that kind of led me into looking for the original textbooks when I'm out and about, and then I started realizing there's so many different cover variations, so I've tried to collect all the different covers of the Nancy Drew books for the same title, which is really fun. And I think starting this podcast also made me realize just how many Nancy Drew books there are, because initially I went to this estate sale with my dad and I found like 70 plus Nancy Drew books, and I thought, I've probably found them all, right? Wrong. I was so wrong. There's so many different series, and there's some that are written in first person, and then there's the ones that we know that are written in third person, newer, older, and that has just been really, really cool, kind of educating myself on all the different versions and different series. And that's kind of what inspired me to read these books in chronological order for the podcast, or as close to it as I could get, because I have seen Nancy evolve so much over the years, like depending on what decade she's being written in, and I just think that's really neat to see. Okay, so this next question is, have you read The Mystery of the Lost Dogs? So no, I've actually not read this book. I actually had to look it up. I think it's from the 70s. I think it's like a smaller picture book, kind of geared towards a lot younger kids, and I haven't come across it in all my searching in the wild, but there's actually some Nancy Drew coloring books and activity books out there too. There's a puzzle book. I think it's called Secret Codes or Code Breaking. It was actually featured on an episode of Riverdale. But no, I haven't read that one. I'll have to get around to it if I can find a copy. I have one of the Nancy Drew activity books too. It's really, really cool. Okay, so this next question is, do you have something specific you're still looking for to add to your Nancy Drew collection? Ooh, so I'm always looking for things, but I would love to find some of the original first edition of the 1930s books, the original text. That would be so cool. It would be amazing to find a signed copy by Mildred Ward Benson. Not holding my breath, I think there's only like 30 in existence maybe that we know of. I'm not positive on that number. I'd like to find some more of the books with the dust jackets on them because those are so hard to find. I would love to find more of the Nancy Drew activity books. There's also some comic books. I've got the majority of the actual books like the Nancy Drew Files. I completed that collection a while ago, but I would love to complete the graphic novels and the comic books too. So this next question is, has there been any Nancy Drew book that you started but never finished? Now, I know some people have a pile where they're like, did not finish, but for me, I don't know if you can tell from this podcast, but I'm a bit of a completionist. I have to read a book from cover to cover before I feel like I can have an opinion about it. I just like to know, did I really, really like this book or did I hate it? But I will say that I came really, really close with The Mystery of the Ivory Charm, the revised and the original text. That one was so hard for me to get through. Okay, so this next question is, what's the weirdest Nancy Drew trope in the books? So I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but I have never really liked the trope of how everyone flirts with Nancy. Like, the men can be really, really old or about her age, but everyone finds Nancy attractive. It's kind of odd, and it kind of makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. It made me a little bit uncomfortable as a kid. I was always like, okay, like these people are always saying, Nancy's so pretty, but in such a way that it was creepy. But then again, on the other hand, I feel like it's not a Nancy Drew book unless we point out that Nancy's pretty at least 3 times. Everything comes so effortlessly to her. So this next question is, will you be my new best friend? Your swell stuff and your indie savviness takes the cake. Aww. This is from Samantha. Of course I'll be your best friend. I thought this was so sweet. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast and for sending me in some fun questions. That's been one of the most fun things about starting this podcast, is getting to know all of you and getting to talk on Instagram. And I think it's fun because we can talk about some of the more serious issues within the books, but then we can also just goof around and laugh at how ridiculous some of the plot lines are. And so I just love it, and I just appreciate you all so much. By the way, I kind of announced this on Instagram, like semi-formally, but I'm gonna be at the Nancy Drew convention in Pennsylvania in October. I would love to meet you guys there. It's this convention put on by Jennifer Fisher, and I think the theme this year is the witch tree symbol, the book, and the game Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, so it's gonna be super fun. You can check it out on her website, which is www.nancydrewsleuth.com. I believe the registration may be closed already, but there's always next year. Okay, so this next question kind of segues into the games, and it says, have you played every Nancy Drew game? So I kind of let this confession slip out on one of our podcast sisters joint episodes that I did with Susie Should Be Sleeping and Alexa and Candace from the River Heights Buzz podcast. But I've actually never finished playing Midnight in Salem. I trash talk that game all the time because the graphics really turned me off like they did a lot of people, but I haven't finished it, so maybe I should apply the same thing that I do with the books. I should try to finish the game before I form an opinion of it, but that's one game that I've never finished. So I'll have to do that later for the podcast. Ooh, okay, so this next question is interesting. What books that you've read would you love to see turned into a game? So off the top of my head, I would love to see A Taste of Danger made into a game. I think it's book number 174. I think it would be cool to see Nancy, Bess, and George go to this culinary retreat, and there's all these mishaps and food getting poisoned. Like, it was such a good mystery, and I think it'd make a really cool game. I also think this book that I'm currently reading, The Double Horror of Finley Place, number 79, would make a great game. So basically, without giving too much away, there's 2 houses and they're across the street from each other, and there's this movie that's being filmed at one of the houses, and whatever happens in that horror movie script, it happens for real at the house across the street. So it's really creepy. There's a lot of horror movie tropes, and I think it would make an excellent game with a lot of jump scares. So this next question is, what is your favorite puzzle in all of the games? So as silly as this sounds, I really enjoy all the little matching games. Like, I love the matching game on that child's toy box in Danger on Deception Island that Jenna gives us. We have to get her trinket from Hilda Swenson out of it. I love the matching tile puzzle in the crypt in Crystal Skull. I just love stuff like that. And I also, oddly enough, love making Manette her tea and all the chores on Shadow Ranch. Like picking the vegetables, it doesn't bother me. Ooh, another good question. What relationship advice would you like to give Nancy and poor Ned? I think I would tell Nancy to be by herself for a while. I think she really needs to just be by herself, go solve some mysteries, and she can meet people along the way. I mean, she definitely does that, but I think she doesn't need to string Ned along as much as she does sometimes. Sometimes Nancy can be a great girlfriend, and then other times she's horrible at it. And the advice that I would give Ned is just stand up for yourself more. I think that he needs to not really put his foot down, like that doesn't sound good, but maybe grow a spine a little bit. I think that he is great at giving Nancy her space, but sometimes in doing that, he doesn't stand up for himself, I guess. Okay, here's another relationship geared question. Favorite special friend for Nancy excluding Ned? Okay, well, I can tell you one thing. It's not going to be Dirk the tennis champion from the earlier books. He was horrible. He sounded like just a complete, don't want to talk about him. But I would say maybe, okay, don't hate me, Nancy and Ned shippers, but maybe Frank Hardy. I know he's not really in some of the books we've read so far, but he is in some of the super mysteries with Nancy. Or maybe John McBride from Lilac Inn. I think he was kind of cool. There was something there, but I'll have to get back to you on this because there's probably going to be so many more love interests for Nancy in the future. Okay, so this next question has to do with my rabbit, Reese. How often do you read with your rabbit, and how many Nancy Drew books has Reese taste tested? So usually when I'm reading the books, I'm also taking notes. Sometimes Reese will sit next to me, but she's kind of feisty. She likes to hop around the house and do her own thing and go get a treat from her cage sometimes. Luckily, she hasn't actually taken a bite out of the books before. I try to keep them up out of her reach. She really likes cell phone chargers, the cords. She has a taste for that for some reason. Maybe it's a little bit spicy. I don't know. She's actually killed 2 of my cell phone chargers, RIP. But I think she can tell that I like the books. I also think whenever I have Reese out, like she expects my full attention. She's like, nope, you're going to put that down and you're going to pet me. Which, that's how it should be. Okay, so this next question is, are there any of the books you've read that you tell people not to read? Now, I always want to encourage people to read books, especially Nancy Drew books, but if there were 2 books that I would have to say automatically just don't read these or definitely don't start with these, it would be number 13, Mystery of the Ivory Charm, and the Greek Symbol Mystery, number 60. It just makes no sense. Ooh, this is a character question. This one is, I think I relate to Bess most in the books. Who do you relate to? I would have to say Bess and Nancy. Like, I love aspects of Bess, like she goes shopping sometimes. She's, sometimes characterized as being kind of flighty, kind of all over the place, but I love Bess. I feel like she is such a nice character, and I like Nancy too because she's a little more methodical, a little more logical, and I feel like Nancy, Bess, and George are all kind of different sides to the coin, but I would say I relate most to Bess and Nancy. So this next question is, what are some of your favorite moments in the Nancy Drew books? So I love the family moments that we get with Nancy, Carson, and Hannah. I love when Nancy's off and she's solving a mystery and it's really full of adrenaline, but I love those moments where Hannah's just cooking dinner and Carson's just got off work. It just makes it seem so homey and so relatable. And I love the lighthearted friend moments with Bess and George, not the moments where they're picking at each other and George is being mean to Bess. I like the moments where they're just genuinely nice to each other and they're going on trips with Nancy. Those are some of my favorite moments in the books. Okay, so this next question, what is my favorite series of Nancy Drew? So I love the original 56 series because that's what I grew up with as a kid, but I really do like the later paperbacks. I think it's because I'm reading them for the first time. A lot of them I didn't even know that they existed. So it's been kind of like reading the old books from my childhood, but it's fresh because I've never read them before, if that makes sense. It's kind of like recreating this sense of nostalgia because those books that I read as a kid, they've been fun to reread, but then I'm just kind of starting these books that I've never read before, and it's like more of the same but updated. So that's been just kind of cool. So this next question that was sent in is, what is your favorite Nancy Drew scene in a TV show or movie? So I really love the scene from the Emma Roberts movie. I think it came out in 2007, where Emma throws the bomb down the manhole in Chinatown. Just, they have her in slow motion, jumping, and it's exploding in the background. I love that scene. And I also love a lot of the scenes in the 1970s TV show with Pamela Sue Martin. I love the episode, I think it's called The Secret of the Whispering Walls, and they took a lot of aspects from The Secret of Redgate Farm. I love when Pamela Sue Martin as Nancy is kind of journeying through the walls in the house with a candle. Like, that was just peak Nancy Drew. Oh, okay. Here's another more personal question. What is your favorite dessert? So, I really like blondies. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're kind of like brownies, but they're more vanilla flavored. Those are really good. I also think you can't go wrong with strawberry cake with cream cheese icing. Like, that is real good. Okay, so this next question is, what are you going to do with yourself when you finish reading the series? I have no idea. I am just gonna hope that they just put out more books and more games and more just Nancy Drew media, because I will be very sad when that day comes. But yeah, I have no idea. Maybe I'll turn to the Dana girls for some comfort. Maybe I'll start reading the Judy Bolton series. Ooh, another game-related question. Which game is your favorite? So I really love Danger on Deception Island. If I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be that one. But I also really like Danger by Design and Phantom of Venice. I think it's something about Nancy truly being undercover. Like, she's more of a spy in those games because she's undercover working at Manette's studio, and then she's working for the GDIF in Phantom of Venice. And I just love the fact that we get to go to Europe. But as far as Danger on Deception Island goes, I remember where I was when I played that game for the first time. I was at my great-grandmother's house. I would always stay over at her house, and we would make pancakes the next morning, and she helped me solve some of the puzzles. And so, I don't know, some of it's the nostalgia from, just who you were with when you played these games or when you read the books. And I just always think of her every time I play that game. Okay, this person wants to know, what traits do you share with the Nancy Drew characters? So, I don't know. I try to be fairly polite like Nancy, I feel like, but sometimes I'm blunt like George, unfortunately. But I also think that I'm passionate like Bess, and also not really anxious to get into dangerous situations. Like, I'm with Bess on that one. I'm like, let's not explore the creepy old mansion where the creepy old man lives. Like, let's not. This next question is, would your husband ever solve mysteries with you? I think he would. I think that my husband would be a good person to have along when you're going to solve a mystery, and I've kind of had him get into some of the games and play them a few times with me, which is really fun. We just love to go on adventures together. Now, this next question is, if you could choose where to solve a mystery, where would you choose? I think definitely Italy, France, or Japan. I think it would be cool to solve a mystery in one of those countries. Ooh, okay, so this question is related to podcast episodes. Will you have more collab or special guest episodes? I definitely want to. I want to have more guests on. I want to do some more collaborative episodes with other podcasts. I think that that's so fun. Okay, this question that was sent in is, if any of your pets were a Nancy Drew game/book character, what would they be? So I think Reese would be the bungalow mystery, because she's a rabbit. Get it? Bunny, bungalow. Or maybe she could be the clue in the crossword cipher, because she is a little puzzle and she always keeps me guessing. Next question. What's your favorite book you've read so far from the entire series? So I still think it's Lilac Inn or Shadow Ranch, the revised text. They're just so classic, I can't get away from them. This question is, what's your favorite dish from the What's Cooking segment? Anything that Hannah makes. I love her pies, her dinners. I think she made Aunt Eloise a blackberry cordial recently in one of the books, and that sounded phenomenal. Just not the fish pudding from Mystery of the Tolling Bell. Ugh. Okay, next question. How old were you when you became a Nancy Drew fan? So I was around 8 years old when I started reading the books, and I was 10 to 11 when I started playing the games. and I've been a fan ever since. Oh, this is gonna be hard. Top 5 favorite games and then least favorites. Okay, we're gonna start with the least favorites because that's always easier. I know I said I shouldn't trash talk this game, but I'm gonna put Midnight in Salem on there as a placeholder just for now. Shattered Medallion, Labyrinth of Lies, Ransom of the Seven Ships, and Sea of Darkness. I don't really like that game. I know a lot of people love it, but I just don't like it. Top 5 favorite games: Danger on Deception Island, Danger by Design, Phantom of Venice, Treasure in the Royal Tower, and probably Secret of Shadow Ranch. That's really hard to do. It's really hard because I'm like, I love like Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, Warnings at Waverly Academy. It's hard. Next question is, what is your go-to comfort Nancy Drew book? And I know I've said these books a lot on this episode, but I just really, really like The Mystery at Lilac Inn. I love Password to Larkspur Lane and Secret of Shadow Ranch, the revised text. Like, you can't get better than those books. They're some of my favorites. And some of those later paperbacks, The Message in the Haunted Mansion, Treasure in the Royal Tower, those are so good. Aw, someone wanted to know, how long have you had Reese? So I've had Reese for going on 4 years now. I got her at the end of 2021. Reese's so sweet. She's really cuddly for a rabbit. Not all rabbits are super cuddly, but I have worked with her and got her to where she's really comfortable being held, and she's so sweet. This next question kind of goes along with that one. Does Reese have a story? When did you get her? So Reese was actually a Facebook find. I paid $20 for her, but I went and picked her up in Sweetwater, Tennessee, and she's been the best little bunny. She's so cute. Okay, this question is funny. Does your husband ever use Reese in his magic acts? So no, she might do it. I don't know. She's kind of feisty. Like, she might not do it. Rabbits they like when they're in a dark space and kind of contained, like that calms them a lot. But I just feel like she's kind of like a one-woman show. She tends to steal the show whenever she's in the room. That's just kind of her personality. So this next question is, what is the oldest book you have in your collection? So probably some of the original text picture cover books. I haven't had as much luck finding the super old books like those 1930s first editions yet. Oh, and this is a good question. When collecting Nancy Drew books, do you pay attention to prices, and what is the most you've paid for a book? I do. So I love bargains, and I love to look on Mercari and eBay sometimes to find like book lots. And so far, the most I've paid for a book was for this Nancy Drew Hardy Boys Super Mystery, Danger Down Under. For some reason, it's more rare, and I paid like $27 for that one book. It was crazy. Ooh, this is going to be a tough question. Also, what actresses would you cast for Nancy and her crew? So I'm not as up on any of the new actresses in Hollywood, but I would say, just based on looks alone, for Nancy, maybe Abigail Cohen, maybe Jenny Ross. They both have red hair. Bess is a little bit harder. Like, I would love to see her played like by someone like Florence Pugh or possibly Sabrina Carpenter. I know she's more into singing now, but I don't know. It's hard. You want somebody who's fun and bubbly to play Bess. For George, maybe Rami Weltman or Sarah Wasglass. I hope I'm saying her name right. I don't know. This is just based on looks. I would love to dive deeper into some of their acting careers and see them in some things. I've seen them in a few things, but I don't know. I feel like casting is partially looks and partially talent and mannerisms, so it's kind of tricky. Okay, this next question is, if you could be magically transported into any Nancy Drew book that you've read so far and live out the story, which would it be? Probably Message in a Haunted Mansion or The Hidden Staircase. Oh, this is a good one. You've just been given a free month-long vacation to any one country in the world. Where are you going? Probably Japan or France. Those are really high on my bucket list. Okay, so this person said same vacation question, but you can only take one character from any Nancy Drew game and one character from any Nancy Drew book with you, but it can't be Nancy, Bess, or George. Who are you taking? I think I would love to take Aunt Eloise and Professor Hotchkiss. They're both teachers. I feel like they would both get along, and they both just seem like super cool older ladies. Next question. What is your favorite color? I just need to know, okay? Probably mustard yellow. I had someone comment on this while I was out one time. I was wearing like a mustard yellow cardigan, and then I pulled out my wallet and it was mustard yellow, and the person was like, "You really like that color, don't you?" And I was like, "Yes." Oh, blistering heat or freezing cold? Freezing cold. I cannot stand when it's over 70 degrees. When it's like 90 plus, I am not going outside. I would rather be freezing cold. Okay, next question. Which season is your favorite to dress for? Example, are you a summer sundress girly or a fall jacket booties gal? Fall all the way. I love layering. I love scarves, boots, all of it. Next question. Have you ever watched I Love Lucy? Would you consider yourself a fan? So I have watched some of I Love Lucy, but not extensively, but I do love Lucille Ball. I think that she was a comedic genius and she was such a pioneer for studios in Hollywood. Oh, and this is the last question. Who could you see PC game Nancy being in a happy relationship with other than Ned, Frank, or Henry? So I think I could see Nancy with Dave Gregory from Secret of Shadow Ranch, or Alec from The Silent Spy, or maybe even Joe Hardy. I think that could work. So that is all the questions that you guys sent in. I had so much fun getting to do this episode. Thank you so much for sending in such great questions. I thought this was just fun to do for the 100th episode, and I wanted it to be something special and kind of different. I may have to do another episode like this later on in the podcast because this was really fun. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, this morning, afternoon, night, whatever time you're listening to this. I really appreciate it, and thanks for supporting True Drew podcast. For next week's episode, we're going to jump back into some of the Be a Detective series that we were covering previous to this episode. So we'll be jumping into book number 3, The Feathered Serpent. So we'll have a lot more alternate endings coming your way. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. Can't get enough of the podcast? Then check out my subscription series, True Drew Files, available on Apple and Spotify. For Nancy Drew books and merchandise, you can check out my website, www.truedrewpodcast.com. For business inquiries, you can contact me at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram at True Drew Podcast.